Right, welcome to the watercolor perspective piece. This is for 8th grade. For this project, you're going to create an original detailed watercolor piece with a focus on value and perspective. The piece must have a foreground, midground, and background. I know the sky doesn't count as a background. If we look at this piece right here, you can see this building right here is in the foreground because it's closest to us. These tracks and this incline here, this incline cars are in the midground because they're in the middle, and then this building is in the background. Things in the front or foreground are going to have more detail because they're closer to us. We can see them really well. Middle ground, a little bit less detail. And then when we get here, we have even less detail. This building was white bricks. I didn't include each brick because it's that far away that we just kind of see the hint of those things in there. Okay, so that's how you're going to create your piece, and you're going to use watercolor for this. And perspective is just simply the way we view things. So keep that in mind as we do this. So there's lots of artists to study for this. So your teacher will walk you through this. You're going to click on this website and you're going to pick an artist. There's a ton to choose from. For limitations, I'll say no silhouettes, where it's, let's say, an African landscape and there's animals that are there on the horizon and they're all like blacked out, kind of in black. That's a silhouette. We don't want to do that just because it's too easy. You're not really learning everything that you want to. Not that they're not cool, but I want you to do something without those so that you learn some new techniques. You're going to use watercolor on watercolor paper for this. You can use palette, cakes, or tubes. It doesn't matter. I would say at least 9 by 12 so you can get those really good details with your brush. And if you want to add, whatever you want to add to it is fine. For this project, you can create anything. It doesn't have to be outside. Landscapes do work well for perspective, but it can be inside. It doesn't have to be outside. It can be anything. But layers are going to be the key to success for watercolor. Your rubric's here. And this is what you're going to do each day. Class 1, you're going to brainstorm ideas and sketches. You'll click on the Artist of Study link and select an artist you would like to study for the piece. There's 25 here for you to look through, so just look through and find one you like. Write his or her name in your sketchbook and then list 3 things you observe about their style. Is it very realistic? Do they use certain amounts of color? How would you describe their style to someone else? Just in 3 words or 3 short little notes about their style. Then you're going to brainstorm ideas for your piece and select an image to paint. And I want you to paint in that style of that artist that you found, and that's why I want to write it down so we don't forget later. You could definitely do realism or choose one of their styles. So you're going to create 2 sketches that are altering the composition using the rule of thirds that you've learned about in previous projects. So to summarize, you're going to look at the watercolor artists. You are going to select one, write 3 things about their style, pick your idea, and then create 2 sketches. So again, this is perspective. So we see things here where we're looking up into this. So this is the building that you would get in at the bottom of this mountain, hillish mountain. And then you take these little cars up and you go into this section right here. Kind of think of it as like a train station, and then you get off and you're on top of the mountain. And that's something that's showing really cool perspective. So you want to look for perspective so that you see that foreground, middle ground, and background when you're looking for ideas. Class 2, you're going to learn about watercolor. You're going to watch the 2 videos I have below, and there are 10 common mistakes to avoid when using watercolor. And then you're just going to kind of take notes on those and just write down the 10 mistakes that you want to make sure that you avoid, and that's really going to help. These are the 2 videos right here. You watch one and then the other. You will make at least one of these mistakes when you do this project, and that's okay. That's what happens. But by looking and learning and watching these videos, you're going to know, okay, that's why it looks like this. I know my mistake, and then you are going to also know how to fix it, okay? So that's why it's really important to kind of think about these things ahead of time. And then in your sketchbook, you're going to create a sphere and value scale using watercolor. Yes, watercolor paper works better, but when we're just doing practice, you can definitely use your sketchbook or just computer paper is fine too. So this video is going to show you how to do a sphere and value scale. If it looks terrible the first time, which it might, which is okay, just redo it. It's no big deal. With this, you're learning the paint to water ratio, how much water and how much paint. Don't be afraid to utilize the lid of your palette. If you're using the 8 or 16 color watercolor palettes, that is going to be where you're going to want to make those colors. So for example, in the lid, I could just add some water and then add like a drop of purple, and that will help with a lighter value. So kind of keep that in mind as you go. Class 3, you're going to map out your final piece. So you're going to use watercolor paper to do this, and you're going to map out your final piece there. So you want to erase as little as you can, and when you do, if you do have to erase, make sure you do it as gently as you can. Think of watercolor paper as a thick paper towel. You want to be as gentle and careful with it as you can. That's why you draw light and you erase gently if you have to erase. A really great idea for this, is which I always have my students do when we work with watercolor, is to draw your piece on a full page in your sketchbook, and then take your watercolor paper and put it on top of it, and you can either go to a light table or to a window and then just trace it. You're tracing your own work, and that's okay. You're not tracing someone else's work. And if you need to go to the cafeteria, thinking if you don't have a window in your classroom or something like that, the cafeteria might be a good area, but that's going to help you if you're getting lots of eraser marks and just kind of not really getting it. The second half of this class, or at the end, and you can always do this another day if you don't quite have time, is just to paint a tree together as a class using the video below. So your teacher will play the video, and then what you will do is paint what you see. They'll pause the video, and then you'll paint. They'll pause, you'll paint. So you're just doing it along with the video, and that's going to help you. It may look really bad the first time, and that's okay. This is probably the first time you're painting this realistically. No big deal, it's fine. All right, class 4, you're going to do your underpainting. So you're going to begin with light watercolor washes, and a wash is where you have a lot of water and a little bit of paint. And you're going to do that in every area and allow that to dry before adding another area. And this is going to help you kind of set the stage for your piece, the underpainting. So if you've done watercolor before and it looked terrible, which that happens to people, it's probably because you saw trees and you said, okay, these leaves are green, and you just grabbed the green right from the palette and you just made them one solid color green. And then you made the trees one solid brown, the water one solid blue, and you're just like, wow, this doesn't look good, because it probably didn't, and that's all right. But this is how you make watercolor look realistic. Notice this green, look how light it is all the way across here, okay? And this blue all the way across. Notice I went right through those trees that I drew because that brown is going to cover it. So I'm creating an even watercolor wash by using a lot of water and just a little bit of paint on my brush, and that's how you get that. Practice in your sketchbook beforehand. That's going to help you make sure you get the right value. And if you get, like, let's say I was painting right here in the brown and there was like a blob of brown, you're like, oh no, I messed up. It's okay, just take some more water on your brush and just kind of move it around, and it'll wash it out into the other areas. It's not a big deal. What you should not do is take a paper towel and try to rub and like dry it off like that. That's just going to ruin your paper. So be careful with that. And you want to kind of work around, especially since you have a lot of water on your brush. Maybe I do this light wash of this light blue sky, and then I do this light blue water wash, and then I'll go back and do, then I'll do this brown, and then I'll go back and do the green. What you don't want to do is have like this green wet and then do this blue right here, because if they're both wet, they'll bleed together. So you don't want to do that. Here's another example of underpainting, where I just took all the values that I thought I was going to use, the colors and things like that, and just did like the lightest version of them. This is the key to making your pieces look good with watercolor. This video too is perfect, so you're going to watch this in the beginning of class, and this is going to help you see it from start to finish, why you underpaint, how everything works, and it's time-lapse, so it's only a couple minutes. All right, class 5, you're going to add layers. So this is where you're going to continue with your underpainting, but add more. Okay, also be really careful of areas that should remain white that you don't paint them because there's not white watercolor. So you just have to leave your paper white in that area. You can also use masking fluid if your teacher has any. But again, you can see I'm just kind of building these layers up slowly. I added some more to the water, some more to the this tree grouping in the background, but still keeping everything pretty light. Again, this is a great video to watch. I would suggest watching this class so you can kind of see some ideas. Class 7 will be your self-evaluation. Your teacher will go over this with you so you understand what's going on here and how you're going to be graded. Remember, it's not due this day, but this is going to help you see what you need to do to improve the quality of your work. Class 8 and beyond, you're going to keep adding layers, allowing for drying time in between until you're satisfied. And then sign your name in the bottom right with the year, and then turn it in. But you can see this is the same painting that I was working on. And I would say, just to kind of like give you a number of layers, these trees probably have about 10 layers on them, and probably about 10 different greens that I was mixing up as I went just in the lid of my palette. And these trees, look, and you see where it's light. Some of it I left just the very basic light brown that I added, and then I added more brown and more brown and more brown, and then some black on top of the brown for the really dark areas. The same thing with the foreground, the collar, and all these things. You really want to be careful and slow when you build up your layers. Watercolor is all about patience. You do a layer, you have to let it dry. You do a layer, you have to let it dry. Otherwise, you'll overwork your paper, which you learned about in those other videos that you're going to watch, but that's important. All right, so your visual process is here again, so you just can kind of see that. I started with underpainting, did some more layers, added even more layers. You can see how it's starting to develop. And then again, of course, I ended here with this painting. So it just takes a lot of layers. Again, here was this boat with the underpainting. And then here you can see when I added details, what it can look like. Look a lot better. You're going to hate it in this stage, and that's okay. It's what it's supposed to look like. It's the process. Here's some more examples of things you can do. For all of these pieces that I'm showing you, I only used just an 8 palette watercolor or praying watercolor palette, like super cheap, $1 at Walmart. I didn't use anything special. I just used those. It's all about how you mix your paint and how you use it with a water to paint ratio. So that's going to be important. But again, here's some pieces. You can look through these with your teacher. And this, you can use just black and white. These are some pieces I did with watercolor using only black and water, and was able to create all these different values. So think about that as you're working, and some different things. And this is a little bit of a different style. If you're going for one of those other artists who's not creating quite realism, but kind of the impression of realism there, just to kind of show you some different things. If you're having trouble with a perspective and you kind of not really sure about that, there's a really cool project that I made here on foreshortening. You might want to check it out. It might help you a little bit. Again, here's a really cool video just to help. Here's some examples that are really, really fun that you can look at. And here's something on watercolor landscape. If you're getting stuck, if you're doing a landscape, or if you're getting stuck, kind of is a little bit more basic for you to look at. All right, so I'm super excited. Remember, again, you are creating a perspective piece. It can be anything. Like I'm sitting at my computer right now recording this video. My drink sitting here could be my foreground. My coffee table with a spray bottle on it could be my midground because it's kind of midway through the room, and the background could be the gate that's leading back into the bedrooms. Like it could be that. It doesn't have to be anything outside, or it doesn't have to be anything crazy. But perspective is really fun. It's just the way that we view things. And as artists, we have to create the illusion that things are closer, kind of farther away, and then really far away. If you've ever gone on a trip and you look and you see mountains in the distance that look blue, we know they're not blue. That's called atmospheric perspective. The sky is shining off of these mountains. They're so far away, we see them as blue because of the sky. So it's just kind of that same perspective here and the same reasoning. So I hope you guys are super excited. Again, I used just a basic 8 8-color palette for this one, just Crayola, super cheap from Walmart. You don't have to have great watercolor. Anything you do will be awesome as long as you learn how to blend your colors and things like that, and it's just going to take practice. All right, good luck.